Recording. Just ahead.
Awesome. Additionally, just as a reminder, the views that I'm going to be expressing today are exclusively mine. They don't reflect official policy or position of either the Navy, the Department of Defense, or the US government. Okay, so my background, I was an Army brat my entire life. My dad retired when I was 17 after a 24-year career as an Army FAO. That brought us to Germany primarily for 9 years, and then I also lived in Bulgaria for 2 years. 3 different high schools, the whole shebang. As a military brat, absolutely loved every minute of it, and that's pretty much what drove my passion and my call for service. I attended the University of Virginia from 2011 to 2015. I did the Navy ROTC program there, graduated with a degree in biology, and then commissioned in 2015. That picture is actually my dad giving me the oath of office. He teared up during it. It was very cute. I'm currently enrolled, an MBA candidate, as well as a candidate for an MS in strategic management at Indiana University's Kelley School of Business, pursuing that full-time while I also am full-time, obviously, with the Navy. So flight school and its evolution, at least for Navy pilots now, what I saw, it was a little different before I started, and it has also since evolved. It's become a little bit more current, as well as more reflective of kind of the demands that we see from pilots. So the first part of it was enrolling in IFS, Introductory Flight Screening, which is just 10 hours under supervision, followed by a solo in either a Piper or a Cessna. That's me flying nearby in Alabama. I've gotten much better. I promise you're going to see a somewhat questionable crosswind landing, but I figured it out and I got better after that. Thankfully, because I passed. Continued on to API, which Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination, which is in the schoolhouse in Pensacola. 6 weeks long, 4 to 5 weeks are all classroom based, basic aeronautical information, aerodynamics, weather, navigation, stuff like that. And then 1 week of water survival training with the infamous helo dunker, which I am still not a fan of. I have to do it every 4 years. And I can very truthfully say that it is my least favorite aspect of this job, but it keeps me and others safe. And it is honestly some of the best training that we do. See, here's the somewhat questionable part. I promise it was fine. From there, I went to primary flight training in Corpus Christi. I was in BT-27, the Boomer Squadron, and I flew in the T-6B. That's the lower left picture. From there, graduated, got good grades, and got my first choice, which was to go on to helicopters. Advanced training back in Pensacola. I ended up going to HT8 to fly the mighty TH-57, which I'm about to become an instructor in. From there, graduated, got my first choice, which I had wanted to go to all along, which was Expeditionary Sierras on the West Coast. I had decided that in college after giving a presentation as a freshman that that's what I wanted to do, and I paved the path all the way there. It took about a year at the FRS, the Fleet Replacement Squadron, learning the basics of the 60, handling a larger aircraft, shifting from a 2,000-pound aircraft to a 20,000-pound aircraft obviously handles quite differently, and that took some adjusting. And then as I ended up getting selected for an expeditionary squadron, I also needed to learn how to fly the Fire Scout, the MQ-8 Bravo, and now they've transitioned to the MQ-8 Charlie. The Fire Scout is one of the newer unmanned helicopter systems that the Navy uses. They're almost exclusively used aboard LCS, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Oh, shoot, I did not mean to start that again. All right. So I ended up going to HSC 23, Helicopter C Combat Squadron 23. Like I said, it's expeditionary in nature. What that means for the Navy is that it is all detachment based. So the squadron is the largest squadron on the West Coast in the Navy. It's grown from about 260 sailors when I first joined to pushing 470 by the time I left. still in the exact same size space. So we're kind of busting at the seams, but we also are the go-to squadron for the wing that is the next echelon above us. As we're detachment based, we fragment the squadron to deploy on different types of ships. Our primary deployments being littoral combat ships. The LCS program has gotten a lot of media attention lately. I will touch on that lightly, but if you're curious about how LCS is doing, I encourage you to Google it. Also, we frequently deploy with amphibious ready groups, which include the L-class ships, LHDs, LPDs, and that type, and I'll speak to that as well. And then if you are a very lucky aviator, you get to deploy on a hospital ship or a supply ship, which involves a lot of important flying and just a lot of flying in general, which we all know we love the most. HSC 23 is comprised of Sierras and Fire Scouts, so the Bravo and the Charlie variant. The Charlie variant recently came online, got fleet tested, got approved, and I believe just went on its maiden deployment on an LCS. That was East Coast. Our first one is about to deploy next month, actually. Being the largest squadron, we have 14 Sierras last I checked, and 3 Charlies. Our primary missions include anti-surface warfare, special operations, forces support, personnel recovery, logistical support, search and rescue, and then with the Fire Scout, we also do ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, as well as remote targeting with the Fire Scout. Most Navy helicopter squadrons do all these missions with the exception of the ISR portion, because not all Navy squadrons have the Fire Scout. That's exclusively expeditionary squadrons. So the way I wanted to break this down was how we kind of operate day to day at home, and then how we operate in our various different deployment type mission sets. So home guard, this is when we are actually in San Diego. We're not deaded out with an allocated deployment specifically attached to a boat. We are operationally responsible to the wing, our next level echelon commanding over us. As such, we have duty that the squadron fulfills. The biggest one is our ready duty SAR. That's an alert posture that we generally hold for a few days once a month. We serve as the backup search and rescue asset to the Coast Guard station in San Diego, who's the primary asset. Unless it's either a Navy ship, Navy personnel, or a Navy base that's involved, then we become the primary asset. In the 3 years that I was at HSC 23, our RDS got called twice. Once was for the AAV, the amphibious assault vehicle mishap that occurred in July 2 years ago, but I'll speak to that later because I was intimately involved with that one. And then most recently, we were also the primary on-call RDS, ready duty SAR, for the mishap that occurred with a Sierra with HSC 8. That happened 31 August of last year. In that instance, and to kind of show you what happens when these things get called away. So HSC 8 was operating for a carrier qualification detachment in SoCal, in Southern California nearby. They had an aircraft fall overboard off the side. The ship immediately sounded the alert. Our squadron, our duty officer, was notified that there was an incident, and in less than an hour, we had 2 aircraft headed that way to do the search. My squadron became the operational hub for the entire event. So every squadron was flowing into our spaces. We were controlling inflow and outflow of information. We were building a timeline. We were creating datums. We were the hub for everything that was going on. Unfortunately, in that specific instance, we ended up losing five sailors, 2 of whom were my close friends from flight school, but one of them was rescued, and that was actually an air crewman from my squadron. Other duties that we stand quite frequently are for firefighting. In Southern California, firefighting tends to be more of an issue than we would obviously like. We are also secondary, sometimes tertiary asset for this, as there's a dedicated aviation firefighting assets in the area with CAL FIRE. We get called if there's a fire either on a Navy installation with naval equipment, or if CAL FIRE is pulled excessively into other areas and there aren't enough assets in the area. So frequently what will happen is the fires will start in the LA area. CAL FIRE will get pulled up to LA, and then the fires will spread down to San Diego. That's when we get called in to assist. One instance that occurred in the last few years was a naval asset that was set on fire intentionally. The Bonhomme Richard, that's the picture here. I would not call it a distinct pleasure, but I did have the opportunity to actually put firefighting training to use. That's me and my friend trying to put out the fire on the Bonhomme Richard. Thankfully, no one was injured in that event, but the ship was totally lost. Other things that we are responsible for at Home Guard is maintaining ship currencies. So every ship has a dedicated deck team. They all need a certain number of evolutions every month in order to be qualified to land aircraft on their ship. Through the wing, we get assigned to go do either vertical replenishment practice or just landing and taking off practice with them. Other currency requirements that we have are for ordnance. For those that are less familiar with the 60 platform, for the Navy specifically, we carry Hellfire. We carry both guided and unguided rockets. We can carry a 20 mic mounted gun on the left-hand side. My squadron does not, as we're expeditionary and we have less funding for these kinds of things. And then we also have door gunners in the back that do 50 cal and 7.62. One of the other requirements that we have is search and rescue currency. You can see my air crewmen happily jumping out of the aircraft at about 10 feet. That's 10 feet and 10 knots above the water, where they do their jump for their daytime rescues. They also practice nighttime rescues, which involve going 70 feet down the rescue wire. And then, like I mentioned, we maintain currency for the boats, both in vertical replenishment as well as both landing and taking off. Another big thing that we do at home is training ourselves. Really, a lot of that development, both tactically and just in basic designations, is all handled in-house. We will go out and use the weapons school for higher level qualifications to get their expertise, particularly when it comes to current missions, developing landscapes, and then shifts in tactics. The basic qualifications that we work through. When you first show up at the squadron, you'll be a pilot qualified and model, which, to put this nicely, we trust that you know the systems, but that's about where the trust ends. You're not allowed to start an aircraft by yourself. We know that you can get in safely, get out safely, but all the training after that comes through your aircraft commanders. So we take that nugget that comes from the Fleet Replacement Squadron, we build them up both in experience, qualifications, just time, really exposure, repetition, and then exposing them to all of our basic mission sets that I talked about before. Once they've proven themselves through a series of boards, tests, and knowledge, and then a check ride, they get qualified as a co-pilot. After their co-pilot qualification, they're going to work on their tactical qualifications, which are currently divided up in our core mission sets and then into our PR and our soft mission sets. PR being personnel recovery, soft being special operations support. In our core mission sets, those are really our overwater missions. So anti-surface warfare, escorting operations with ships, weapons employment, really kind of the meat and potatoes of what we do. PRSOF is what I'll call our elevated tactical qualifications, because not everyone is going to get these level of qualifications. The big mission sets there, aside from personnel recovery, is going to be HVBSS, helicopter visit board search and seizure, which I think is probably the coolest thing that we do, and also the thing that naval aviation, specifically naval helicopters, do better than anyone else. We're the ones that can fly 10 feet, from a moving ship with a tiny deck and fast rope seals or Coast Guard security teams on board. Once you get your tactical qualifications, you're going to work towards helicopter aircraft commander, your HAC qualification. You have to prove that you are able to manage risk. That's the big difference between being a co-pilot and being an aircraft commander. As a co-pilot, yeah, you've got the knowledge, you know all the rules. Aircraft commander, you balance the risk and you decide which rules can be bent and which rules have to be broken in order to safely accomplish the mission if it can be accomplished safely. And you're the one that draws the line if it can't be done. I'll speak more to that because I think that's something that the Navy does really great. Operational risk management is beat into us from day one. We're expected to know all of its tenets, its principles, like time applications by heart. For us, the big tenets of ORM are decision-making, assertiveness, mission analysis, communication, leadership, adaptability, flexibility, and situational awareness. We are expected to identify either weaknesses in some of these categories, strengths in these categories, and how we as a crew, if one person is a little bit weaker in communication, how the rest of the crew can both combat that and then work towards improving that to enhance overall mission accomplishment. So the big ticket items here as you're becoming an aircraft commander are, am I making this decision at the appropriate level? Is this the level that I should be making with my aircraft, or should this be pushed above me? So making the risk decision at the appropriate level. Am I sufficiently mitigating this risk? I have a hazard presented to the aircraft, such as a faulty hydraulic system or a tactical threat over there, or it's dark and I can't see and there's no horizon. I'm expected to land on a ship. Can I sufficiently mitigate these risks, still accomplish our mission, and keep the crew safe? Do those risks outweigh the benefits, or do those benefits outweigh the risks? Only then, if the benefits outweigh the risks, will we continue. Balancing these tenets, proving that you have the knowledge, and then getting 500 hours going through a board process, being vetted by all existing aircraft commanders, is what it takes to then be eventually qualified as an aircraft commander. It's a big step for us, and really the highlight of your junior officer career is finally making that qualification and then being the bottom liner and signing for the aircraft yourself. This is a Hellfire shoot in the desert. Detachments and training value. So we're still at home, but we are getting sent on smaller detachments, either in the local area or on a ship, in order to get some kind of other qualification or lend assistance that would not otherwise qualify as a deployment. So personally, in terms of shore-based deployments, I, within my first 2 weeks of the squadron, got sent to Nellis Air Force Base with half the squadron in Las Vegas to do Red Flag. Red Flag is a huge Air Force exercise that ultimately pulls in all the services if they can. Sometimes it's international, and it involves escalating problem sets that are presented to all participants. And our role typically is as the rescue vehicle. What that means is this is all the personnel recovery missions that I was mentioning earlier, but there's going to be a problem. Jets will launch to combat that problem. There may or may not be an isolating incident. Either the jet is shot down or there was an ejection, all simulated, of course. And then we step in. That's our problem to then take over. We have to call in our res cap, Combat Air Patrol, rescue escort, to then build a route and get to that isolated personnel as quickly as possible while avoiding threats en route to pick up that person and bring them back to safety. That is our big role, and getting to integrate a Red Flag is one of the best experiences that you can get as an aviator. I also got to do Fire Scout workups. What's unique about that is you do your Fire Scout training to become a drone operator. You're fully qualified. You've been on a simulator for call it 50 hours, which count as real hours for any unmanned aerial systems. And then they send you to Point Mugu, which is in Oxnard, California. It's up by LA. And this is the first time where you will truly launch a drone and really hope that it doesn't lose its connection and it responds and it does what you tell it to. It doesn't have the best history of doing that. There have been a few mishaps where the aircraft has lost its connection and we've lost the aircraft. As far as I'm aware, no one has yet been hurt beyond someone getting a sprained ankle while they were running away from a drone that was crashing. But I can tell you the experience of actually clicking the launch button when a real aircraft is on the other end is terrifying. I much prefer to actually be in the seat of the cockpit. We also do tactics detachments, normally in El Centro, in the desert, because then we can focus on our PR soft tactical qualifications while in the desert, doing brownout landings, 0-0 visibility, and working there. Ship-based detachments. So I'll speak to the NASA one on the next slide, but I also got to help with the ESB-5. That's an expeditionary staging base. It's a new ship. It just recently got designated and qualified as such, and we were there to determine its future mission set, how naval aviation can be integrated with the ship, what its mission should look like. Should it be an independent steamer, alone and afraid, or should it be attached to either a carrier strike group or an amphibious ready group, and what strengths can it provide? Most of this is classified, so I'm going to kind of keep it at this level, but it will bring a lot of additional capabilities to us. We'll also do carrier qualification detachments, which are for the JET students who are for the first time getting their carrier qualification. So they'll depart from Meridian or from Texas, Meridian, Mississippi, or from Texas in order to come out either to San Diego or to Norfolk, and then they'll land on a carrier for the very first time. Their search and rescue cover is provided by us or by other squadrons. So one of the more exciting things that HSC 23 has been involved in is that we are the squadron of choice for the Artemis program. The Artemis program is the next mission that's going to return humans to the moon. Last I checked, the plan was to send the first woman to the moon, as well as the first person of color. In the time that I've been at the squadron, I participated personally in URT-8, which is the underway recovery test. And then we recently concluded URT-9. Both were with the John P. Murtha LPD-26, which is also going to be the designated ship to work with Artemis when they actually launch the next humans to the moon. The plan, as it stands, is that capsule is going to be returning to the Southern California region to a predetermined location. LPD-26, the John P. Murtha, will be standing by. HSC 23 will be prepared to launch. Once it enters back into orbit, we will launch, and then we will track utilizing a special NASA camera that has been attached to the right side of our aircraft. We will track the capsule as well as another very, very expensive component that NASA wishes to recover. We will track them both coming back down into the water. And then once the capsule has inflated, it's in the water, we will actually launch our rescue swimmers. We will go down, pull the astronauts out, bring them up into the aircraft, and then we'll fly them back to the John P. Murtha. Very exciting on the horizon for us. But back to kind of our normal mission sets. So LCS. LCS, small ship, littoral combat ship. The video playing in the right hand corner is actually a fire scout taking off. So you're watching a drone helicopter take off from a ship. In the expeditionary detachment, we will leave San Diego with either 1 or 2 drones, as well as 160. It's a 25-person detachment. Relative to the size of the crew on the boat, they will have about 60 to 70 in their crew complement that we then supplement. Primary missions all kind of fall in line with missions that the 60 already does, to include FONOPS, freedom of navigation operations, which I got to participate in. It's a big Pacific Fleet strategy that we currently execute there, making sure that freedom of the seas remains intact from competitive claims for land masses. Additionally, a newer mission for the LCS, at least newer on the West Coast, that has proven to be quite successful is counter-drug operations. They will, instead of going to the Pacific theater, they'll go south to the South American theater, and there with an embarked Coast Guard law enforcement detachment, will actually do boat takedowns and seize drugs. Our bigger deployments that we do are with amphibious ready groups. This is expeditionary in nature, and it's going to be a combination of both Navy and Marine Corps. My second deployment was on the USS Macon Island, my first one being on LCS-10, the USS Gabrielle Giffords. But on the Macon Island, we were gone for almost 9 months. It was a COVID cruise. I'm sure no one else here has experienced a COVID deployment. I would not recommend it. It involves strings of being underway for more than 100 days at a time, no port calls. When you do get to pull in, you can't leave the boat. If you do get to leave the boat, you get to be in what we call a sandbox, which is just Connex boxes confining you to the pier. You can't leave, can't interact with anyone. It's nice to be on land, but that's a very unfortunate way to see the world. Anyways, an amphibious ready group is generally comprised of 3 ships: the LHD, the landing helicopter dock, the one that's in the picture, the largest of all the ships in the group being the high value unit of the group, and also kind of where everything is decided and run. It'll have 2 LPDs, smaller ships, just like the John P. Murtha, attached to it. And then potential future operations might include an ESB, like I mentioned earlier. The aircraft involved with the amphibious ready group, the ARG, are going to include Sierras. It'll sometimes include Romeos. My last deployment did. They're vetting the additional capabilities that a Romeo can provide, which is subsurface warfare, which the amphibious ready group is otherwise not capable of. You'll leave with a detachment of F-35s, Marine F-35s. You'll leave with Marine MV-22s, Cobras, Hueys, as well as 53s. The unique thing about the ARG is that it is going to be an ARG MU, the MU being the Marine Expeditionary Unit. So we will deploy with an entire battalion landing team, an aerial combat element, a combat logistics battalion, as well as the command element, which is headed up by an 06 in the Marines, a colonel, and then the ARG is going to be headed up by an 06, a Navy captain. The 2, while equal rank, will have 1 more 06 who serves as Commodore and in charge of both the colonel and the captain. And then the Commodore ultimately decides which between the captain and the colonel will be the supporting versus the supported element, and how we are going to tackle the mission sets. Generally, the Marines serve as the supported asset by us, them being the ones either boots on the ground, strikes by the F-35, that kind of idea where the Navy supports them. And I know you all want to watch a takeoff from a ship. So this is a co-pilot of mine taking off, I think in the Pacific, based off of the shade of blue of the water, but who knows? Could be off the coast of Somalia, could be in the Arabian Gulf, but that's what it looks like to depart from an LHD. All the MV-22s on board you can see are folded up, and then there's another helicopter getting ready to take off. So notables with the ARG. I will talk about the AAV mishap just because I was a pilot for it. So July of 2020, the Macon Island Amphibious Ready Group was in its workups. We were operating off the coast of San Clemente, which is an island that the Navy uses for bombardment exercises, that kind of thing. The USS Somerset, which is an LPD, was deploying amphibious assault vehicles to bombard the coast of San Clemente Island. I had been flying some logistics for about 5 hours. I landed back on the deck of the Macon Island, prepared to shut down. When I landed, my boss, my OIC, came over the tower radio and said, "Hey, Sorcha, you're getting re-rolled. There's a ship taking on water and we need you to go check them out." I said, okay. I was a brand new aircraft commander. This was maybe my 8th flight, signing the bottom line on the aircraft. I was extremely excited. I was hoping for the best, didn't know what to expect. I had a swimmer in the back, my crew chief in the back, obviously my co-pilot. We got some extra gear, filled up on gas, and then we just went. I called out as Rescue 47 as my call sign. We bustered up to the location that they gave us, which is where I had just come from the Somerset doing my logistics run. And when I checked on scene, there was another aircraft already there, Bullet 45, that's actually in the picture. And we talked to the USS Somerset, who was serving as the on-scene commander. We asked for any updates that they had. They had none. They did not know how many people were missing. They did not know how many ships had taken on water. They suspected it was just one because the sea states were fairly rough. And they just asked us to start searching. So Bullet 45 and myself created a line of deconfliction between us based off of the geographical feature nearby on the island. And we decided to do a sweeping search starting at the island and headed towards the boat, as we figured that that would be the path that the amphibious assault vehicle was taken. And amphibious assault vehicles, for those who are unfamiliar, are marine vessels that are amphibious. They're capable of driving on land as well as driving through water. We didn't find anything. We searched for about an hour and a half. At this point, the Somerset called out to both of our aircraft and asked which bird had more gas. At the time, it was me. So I rogered up and they said, 47, we have an urgent medevac. We need you to come take 3 people to Scripps. Scripps is a trauma center in San Diego. It's the highest level trauma center that we have. I would have brought them there anyways, given that they have the best capabilities and the most specialists in the region. So I landed on the Somerset. At this point, it was about sunset, and it was absolute chaos. Pieces of clothes and equipment were flying all over the deck. People were hopping up on the Hueys and the Cobras that were on board, trying to pre-flight them, get them ready to assist with the search. There were people, medical personnel running all over the deck. No one was wearing ear protection, eye protection, float coats, like absolute madness. They chained me down to the deck. And then I started coordinating with Tower, asking the basics. All right, how many people, nature of conditions, how many medical personnel, verifying we're going to Scripps. I don't need gas. Get them out as quickly as possible, and I'll bring them. Tower was clearly task saturated, and there was a massive communication breakdown between the medical center at the bottom of the ship and the people who were running the tower. So I was getting very little information back from them, and I ended up sending my crew chief in the back into the ship to figure out what was going on. He ran in, he came back a few minutes later carrying a stretcher along with a bunch of medical personnel. There was an IV bag, and then one Marine was in the stretcher. They threw him in the back of my aircraft and left to dock with me. My crew chief ran back. At this point, he was gone for about 10 minutes. I'm asking Tower for updates. How many people still? I need to leave. This guy needs help. Tower had no information for me, and I was quite literally in what felt like a fog of war. Finally, another stretcher came out. My crew chief was carrying it with one other person, just the 2 of them instead of the team of 6 that had brought the first one out. And unfortunately, this person was wrapped in a blanket. So he was DOA. Got put into my aircraft. And then at this point, I was still waiting for one more. Called up to Tower. I had both my crew chief, my swimmer, and a doctor in the back. I asked the doctor for the status of the person that had arrived in a blanket, as well as the status of the patient that had arrived alive to my aircraft. He told me that the person wrapped in a blanket had been given CPR for 2 hours and did not make it. And then the person who had arrived alive to my aircraft, he didn't know how he had gotten to that position, but that he was unconscious, had an IV bag attached. And at this point, he had blood that started coming out of his nose. That was my call. I said, we're going to leave now because he needs higher level care right now. And it's still about a 30-minute flight for me to get to Scripps from where we were in the ocean. I called out to the other aircraft to ask them to come back for the third patient, but not knowing their condition and them not being on my aircraft, I was less concerned with them than bringing the person that was actively in my aircraft to higher level care. I ended up making those calls in the blind. The other aircraft did not respond. I was a little nervous at this point about the third person, but I knew that I had to leave. So we departed. We bustered as quickly as we could to Scripps. While en route, I kept my altitude low because I suspected that he had some decompression issues. And he started throwing up blood, and blood was coming out of his ears by the time we were about 10 minutes away from the hospital. We landed, he lived, made a full recovery. Turns out he had a collapsed lung, both his eardrums were burst, and multiple symptoms of decompression sickness. Turns out the AAV, the amphibious assault vehicle, had sunk very, very rapidly. Who knows quite how deep. He managed to get out, and then he lived. And then for everyone concerned about the third person, the aircraft did hear my calls. They did make it to the Somerset. They did pick up the third person. They also brought him to the hospital. He also made a full recovery. So that was probably the most challenging and rewarding experience of my naval career thus far. And all the training was definitely worth it. For Lance Corporal Truxell, who was the Marine who ended up living. Additional notables, which will now seem a lot less exciting from my riveting story, but we did Operation Octave Quartz, which was the exodus of all US forces out of Somalia. We did several Strait of Hormuz inbound and outbound transits, which is always a little bit more interesting and a little bit more exciting because it involves close interactions with Iranians every time and kind of determining what a normal pattern of life is, what their responses should be, how we should respond to those responses. And really the rules of engagement are always developing and always changing. We also did a little bit of OIR support for the jets while we were actually in the Arabian Gulf. So after all that, I deployed twice. What happens after that? But, before you move on to your next tour, you can expect a big job, either as the assistant operations officer, the quality assurance officer, which is what I did, or as the NATOPS officer, which is the standardization officer in the squadron. You're responsible for training everyone, and also as the senior guy, you're going to be doing almost all of the functional check flights, which are super long days, super fun, trying to figure out why the aircraft is not cooperating, why it is still broken, and why maintenance just doesn't ever have enough money to fix it. So the goods and the others of my 3-year experience. The goods being training, I thought was phenomenal when I went through. I felt fully prepared for all the mission sets that we regularly encounter. I was exposed to small moving ships and fast roping live people to them at a very early stage, and I got a lot of looks at that. I had all sorts of training and multiple Hellfire shoots, multiple gun shoots, live SAR training, live med training in the back, things that I know not every junior officer gets, and that's why it's also an other. There are too many mouths to feed and too few opportunities for people to grow and really get that exposure to be able to teach others, which I think is unfortunate. And And it comes from funding, and it also just comes from appropriate allocation of manpower, which right now is just not there. Another huge good is a camaraderie. This is me flying through the Grand Canyon with one of my closest friends. He and I have been in the same 4 squadrons now for the last 6 years. Very close friend of mine. And those kind of relationships that you build with people, those friendships through hardship and misery and struggles, are some of the closest bonds that you can build with anyone. You know, being underway on a ship for more than 100 days at a time, seeing the same 10 people over and over and over again, while very challenging and creates a lot of frustrations and a lot of interesting dynamics, I would do absolutely anything for any of those guys. And that kind of bond can't be replicated elsewhere. So that also kind of touches on my experience. You know, I got to see a lot of the world at a very young age. I've been to Vietnam, I've been to Singapore, I've been to the Philippines, been to Oman and Bahrain, off the coast of Somalia. And I don't know where else you could get that, you know. Some others that I definitely want to talk about. Yeah, the training, the ranking system and how we're evaluated, I think is still incredibly antiquated and is going to result in a loss of talent for the Navy. That initial call to service, which brings a lot of people into the military at this point now, is fulfilled, right? So the Navy needs to figure out how can we retain these people and keep these people longer, our higher hitters who have opportunities elsewhere. And there's an opportunity cost inherently with remaining in the Navy. Right now, the way the ranking system and the fit rep system work is you'll have a group of people that all get ranked at the same time because they're leaving around the same time. You can have a very strong group and then a regular group. You rank each of them, you know, 1 through 6. This group of all very strong people, this number 6 could have been a number 1 in the normal group. But you'll have a number 6 here and a number 6 here. And in the eyes of the big Navy, both of those number 6s are equal. Whereas we know that's not ever true. And I think that's going to drive a lot of people away. Also, a big other is work-life balance. As a JO, as a junior officer, I was gone in the 3 years that I was at HSC 23, I was gone for more than 475 days. I know compared to the past, that is probably less than what it used to be, but now that's a pretty high demand. And then couple that with when you are at home, you're working from 7 a.m. until 6 p.m. quite regularly, flying on Saturdays. It takes a lot of work and planning to balance that kind of demand, and is a huge stressor for people that's also going to drive people out. I know I'm approaching my 45 minutes. So are there any questions?
I have a quick question for you on that search and rescue that you were looking for the amphibious. How high were the swells and how well could you see, you know, trying to figure out if you could see them?
So the swells were higher than normal. Right where we were searching, right by the island, they were a little bit lower. I'd say approximately 3 to 5 feet. A little bit further away from the island, they were closer to 7 to 10 feet, which I think was a contributing factor to the amphibious assault vehicle taking on water and ultimately sinking, plus it not being watertight, as well as all the other things that came out in the investigation. But from where our normal search altitudes are about 150 feet. The other aircraft and I decided to do deconfliction in both altitude and in airspace. So my aircraft went up to 300 feet and he stayed at 150 feet. This view right now actually is at about 450 feet, if I remember that flight correctly. You can see it is really hard to pick out people in the water. It is incredibly difficult, especially on eyesight. We have a camera on board, a forward-looking infrared camera that we can control. So that's what I used that day. I turned it to be heat-seeking, and then I As we flew through the water or over the water, the people in the back are looking outside with their eyes bottom out. The flying pilot is looking, and then I'm exclusively on the camera looking for heat signatures in the water. I found multiple seals sitting on the rocks sunning, but it's very challenging. That search ended up going for several days, exclusively done by my detachment. We had aircraft flying nonstop for it. So this whole medevac happened with me, but it didn't stop there. So I brought them to Scripps. The hospital dropped them off. I went and got gas, and then I flew back to the boat. I ended up landing after almost an 11-hour flight that day. And then I turned the aircraft over to a new crew who launched at midnight and searched from midnight to 4 a.m. And then we had another overlapping aircraft searching from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. And then we just had crews going back and forth. We found gear in the water. We found backpacks. We found float coats in the water, like life vest type, like camouflage cover, but they float. A little bit of gear, but like, it's tough. It's really, really hard. If you're in the water at any point and you're hoping to be found, you need a signaling mirror, smoke, lights, anything that's going to get the attention of the aircraft.
Thank you. Just one more question. Sorry.
Please.
What is a normal crew duty day when you're on a boat doing that type of mission? You know, I mean, you said you came back almost 11 hours. So what is your minimum rest time before you actually get up and go again?
Our governing instruction has a maximum flight period of 12 hours. It can be waived up to 15. But if it's waived, then you need an increased rest period. Normally, you just need 12 hours of rest. If you go all the way up to 15, you are required to have 18 hours of rest. But that's just between flight duties. Technically, you only need 8 hours of uninterrupted opportunity to rest. It doesn't even say sleep.
Right.
But that was a very unusual day. So a normal day on the ship for me would be waking up at 8 a.m., going up, checking in with the detachment. I would probably have a flight in the afternoon of plane guard, which is the biggest mission that we do on a boat, which is just being prepared for a search and rescue. I would go out, pre-flight the bird, take off right on the minute that I'm assigned, and then I would just sit in either the starboard delta or the port delta, which are the names that we give just to orbits on the left and right hand side of the boat. And then every time a jet launches or comes in for landing, I'm paying extremely close attention to how the flight profile is going with my forward-looking infrared camera, watching to make sure all the panels are open, that their gear is down and locked, that they're on what looks like a normal profile. I am a little bit more neurotic in that regard. I know not all naval aviators do that, but I want to be prepared and I want to be ready. I can tell you exactly which panels are supposed to open on the F-35 and what fully extended MV-22 gear looks like versus partially extended gear. But that's just my own anxiety taking over, and also just demanding professionalism and perfectionism all the time.
Sure. You'd be on my crew any day, for sure. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am.
Comment. I'm so glad for your presentation. I'm glad there's somebody there to pick up the flag and carry it forward. Great. Keep up the good work.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions or comments from any of our guests? We're coming up to about 5 or so minutes left.
I've got one.
No.
If
Okay.
Olga and I were just at the Women in Aviation Conference about a week or so ago, and we were encountering a lot of young ladies who are interested in coming into the military, all the services. And they were always, not always, but we got a lot of questions about what kind of unique challenges will I face as a female coming into the military service. And I could speak about Air Force, but I couldn't really talk too much about any challenges that young women are facing that are particular to their gender coming into the Navy, whether that be attitudes or just equipment or procedures or regulations and restrictions type thing. Do you have anything that you would offer to these young ladies as just some information for them to be aware of as they're making their choice of which services to go to?
I mean, I can only speak from a Navy perspective and then my own experiences having gone through. I did experience several people who questioned women being pilots. They were all generally civilians, retired folk. None of them were actually active duty, but they were civilian contractors who were instructors for me. And I definitely had some increased challenges with them, but that also drove my passion for perfectionism and giving them absolutely no questions about passing me. So I think arming ladies with the mindset that mediocrity is a luxury is kind of something that I've always lived by, but it's also getting better every day. The ladies that have followed me that are much more junior in the squadron that are, 3 years younger to me didn't experience that at all. It might have just been a fluke case for me. And then in terms of equipment, so you might be wondering what I did in terms of that almost 11-hour flight and like needing to use the restroom and whatnot. I will say tactical dehydration is a very, very real thing. I did not use the restroom the entire time. I didn't need to because I was limiting and controlling my water intake versus all the men in my aircraft all were able to use the restroom while we were flying or when we stopped for gas. But it doesn't have to be like that. There are multiple things in place, particularly for fighter pilots who have an additional challenge with the G suit and not being able to get out of the cockpit. There's equipment for them to help adapt for in-flight urination if that ever comes up. So the equipment's there, funding is increasing. Female flight suits are also being developed. The first maternity flight suits are coming out and they're being fully funded, paid for, given to you. Those kinds of programs are growing in both attention and in funding sources. So it's getting a lot better.
We saw a lot of two-piece flight suits. And I even saw some men wearing, it looked like two-piece flight suits. So it's not gender specific, but you had to take a second look to make sure that they were two-piece. They look so similar to the one-piece. So that was kind of a neat idea there. There was a vendor booth there on the exhibit hall of a contractor who, in conjunction with the Air Force, has developed a fairly efficient female relief device that a lot of the women, the fighter pilots in the Air Force, have been wearing with great success. And they've been very happy with it. So hopefully that will continue to get developed and get deployed across the services. So there doesn't have to be strategic dehydration that then can impair your ability to fly in your in top physical form, both for you and for the men as well. I mean, they'll feel a little more comfortable if they know that you're comfortable too. So sometimes there's sympathetic dehydration going on. So thank you very much. Appreciate the information.
Yeah. Two-piece flight suits, by the way, are the bee's knees. I exclusively wear two pieces. I think they're phenomenal. Right now, the program from our wing requires new female check-ins to be provided two-piece flight suits right away. So it's gotten a lot better.
That's great. That's a nice improvement from the old days.
Thank you,
The
Tom.
Army has had two-piece flight suits ever since I went through pilot training in 1972.
Yeah.
Lucky.
Those were called fatigues, right? At the time.
The Air Force flew with fatigues.
No, they were flight suits.
We
No,
flew-
Nomex flight suits.
Oh, okay. We flew with fatigues in Vietnam all the time, two-piece. Sorcha, why the Navy and not the Army where your dad was?
My dad did not want me to go in the Army. That's
Me
why.
better. Okay.
Hey, a quick question on retention.
Yeah.
Obviously retention is, you mentioned that at the end here. My name's Brian, a C-17 driver, but that's obviously plaguing all the services, and the airlines hiring is not helping. I mean, I think the competitive thing that you mentioned there, the 1 through 6, and I totally understand that, and that's a challenge. I mean, ultimately, are the services just need more people as well, so that the ops tempo can be less further? I don't know what the answer is, but I think the airlines always being there is going to make it a challenge for the next 20 to 30 years for all of our military services. But just curious your thoughts on what would be a perfect answer to try to blend it to get through this hump that is going to be a big hump for all of them.
I don't have a perfect answer. I do spend a lot of time thinking about this, as I was one of the more unfortunate lumping of people. I was in a very, very strong group. We all could have been number one, and then I had to leave with my number, and I was extremely unhappy with it. And that one incident is causing me to rethink remaining in the Navy entirely. Because most people in the service, I feel like, are not there for money. So money is not always a great incentive. I do know that different services have retention bonuses at critical career milestones. For example, the Navy, for Sierras specifically, has a $175,000 bonus for a 5-year early agreement to stay. But the opportunity cost for not transitioning out, I think, is still higher. In short, I think it has to be a lifestyle improvement. Manpower is a problem in terms of op tempo, but more bodies isn't always the solution either. So, for example, my squadron has almost 475 people. Lots and lots of hands to do work, but not sufficiently qualified. So it's still the same smaller groups of qualified people who end up doing a lot of the work. And then you'll have a whole group of people doing little or are still learning, aren't pulling their fair share, and the problem just cycles. I wish I had a better answer. I will think about it. I like to write papers on how we can be doing things better. Process improvement is something I'm passionate about. And it isn't a topic that I'm exploring, but I haven't quite figured it out yet. I do know that ranking needs to be better, and evaluation systems need to be more reflective of the civilian side, and more either factually based, merit based, and less reliant on the opinion of a commanding officer.
Okay, thank you. I served from the 1990s to the 2014 timeframe, and we always had problems with retention, but we've never had the clarion call that aviators could jump as easily as they can jump now. So I think that it's going to be a real hard battle going forward. But we certainly, as the gentleman said, appreciate you carrying the flag for us right now. We are honored for your service, and no matter how long you stay in, that will always be part of our history of America. So thanks for being part of it.
Thank you so much.
We are just over 8 o'clock. So any last thoughts, comments, questions, complaints? There will be a survey so you can evaluate my logistical planning skills, which are sure going to be the thing that takes a hit out of this presentation. going out along with the recording after this. But any last thoughts for Sorcha? All right, well, go ahead,
I
sorry.
want to say thank you for speaking to us this evening. We appreciate your story, and we wish you, at least I know we all wish you all the best. And just one piece of advice: if you do transition out, think about going to a reserve unit or guard unit and continue your service, because if you went in for the same reasons most of us do, that's something that you will appreciate.
Already planning on it.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I appreciate it. And I also appreciate the opportunity for doing this. Thanks, Taylor, for reaching out to me.
Absolutely. We are so grateful you joined us. Really grateful to know you and to have had a chance encounter one weekend in San Antonio through mutual friends. And we will definitely connect with you afterwards. I have some resources that I think you'll be interested in too, with some stuff the Air Force is doing with women's initiatives to get airframes and equipment to better accommodate women aviators. So thank you again so much. Thank you, everyone. There will be a recording sent out via email and a survey. As you know, we are here to connect and build relationships. So if you have follow-up questions or additional ideas for future events after this, please definitely reach out to odyssey@dedallians.org. And I will see you all next time. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you.